use layers in Photoshop. Now, like anything in Photoshop or anything you do in life, it's difficult until you know how, and then once you've mastered this, this is an extremely useful tool. Before I go into the nuts and bolts of how to use this, to explain what layers are essentially is they're much like individual pages in a block of paper or pages on a file block, and that you can take the pages out and you can change the order of the pages to give you a different product. And that's essentially how layers work. Each layer is a separate page or layer which you can move about to allow you to have a lot of control over the work. Now this is your basic Photoshop interface. This is your layers palette here. I'm just going to join that to my shortcuts. This version of Photoshop I'm using is Photoshop CS6. I believe the current version is the CC version, but essentially the layers haven't changed across many generations, so it'll be essentially the same. The icon for layers is this little icon here, which will bring up your layers. Okay, so there's a number of different ways that you can create additional layers. As you can see here, I have different tabs here, which I'll come on to in a little minute whenever I come to those points. But essentially, to make a new layer, what you do is this is a new layer icon. So if you click on that there, this will create a new layer. Now you'll notice on this new layer or new page, if you want to continue that analogy, what you'll find is you kind of have this checkerboard effect because you have the background here. This is just a blank empty A4 document that I've created here. And what you'll find is because this is full of white space, okay? But if I turn off this layer, you can see these little eye icons. They look like well, they look like eyes to indicate the layer visibility. So you can turn off these here to make them invisible. Now, I've just turned off the layer visibility of the background layer, and now you've seen this checkerboard effect. Now, if you see this checkerboard effect on your screen, what's that? That's indicating that on the layers, however many you may have, on the layers, there is no data present on that layer. So if I just get a new layer and just go with my my pen tool, and I'll just reduce the size of my brush and write hi. Okay, sorry, my processor is running a little bit slow, so I'm doing a recording. If I write this here on this layer, notice that this is on a new layer, which has been created automatically, and will travel together on the one layer. So what you can do then is swap your layers about and have a lot of visibility and flexibility in that. Now, if you decide that, hey, that H didn't turn out very well, I'm not too sure about this writing, what you can do is very easy, just have a layer selected. Now you can see which layer is selected because it's indicated by this kind of grey icon. You can of course select more than one layer just by holding in shift like you would select in any multiple file. What you can do is if you don't like it, you can obviously press the delete button or the backspace button, or you can see there's a waste paper basket down here. Throw it into the rubbish basket, and that will allow you to change that. So just as I say, if you see any here, this is useful if you're doing some blending or such like, because sometimes you're not too sure which layer things are on. So what you can just do is turn off all your layer visibilities and mouse your way through the layers. Now, as I said to you before, it's just like creating pages in a book. So I'm going to close this document here because I don't need this here. And then the words of Blue Peter. Here's one that I have prepared earlier. So I'm going to move on to Katy Perry now in a second. Okay, so I have this document created already. So what I have done is just as I did before. So I'll turn off my layer visibility. So there's all the layer visibility has been turned off. So you can't see what's going on. And now you have this checkerboard effect. But now you have the background turned on, which is filled with white. So the full contents of that there is in white. Now you'll notice it has a padlock. Frequently that happens. You can just double click that and that will change that into layer 0. So what you can do is you can move the items about. So that's just to show you that you have contents in this layer. And as I move them about, you can see this. So I'm just going to turn off each layer visibility and turn them in, discuss them in turn. So there's your layer visibility for layer 1. Now I've named all my layers with the contents that's in the layers. Sometimes that's good practice. Once you've mastered this in Photoshop, you can obviously don't need to name your layers. But just as you're getting used to using Photoshop, I would recommend that you would name your layers, just because it's a little bit complicated to get your head around. It's really very easy once you get your head around it, but until you do, this can be a little bit intimidating. So that's layer 1. We have a layer 2 and a layer 3. So I've made these into different layers. So I'm just going to move them about. Now, if you want to move the contents of a particular layer about, so there's your background layer. So you can actually see if I go to move that, because this is the layer that's selected, if I go to move that, it's moving, whereas the contents of the other layers, which aren't highlighted, aren't selected, they stay where they are. Okay, so that's quite useful. So say I wanted to, I don't know, move this white page or layer up between these layers here, we'll move it above layer 1, but it's still below layer 2 and layer 3. What that'll do will obscure layer 1 because this page will be on top, and just like a full page, it's taking up a full width of the document, which I'll just revert that back to its default position there. If I all you have to do is hold down your mouse button and grab this layer, or select the layer and then hold down your mouse button just to literally drag it up. And can you see that little line that's appearing there as I move up and down? If I let go with that line apart, that has moved up. And as you can see, the layer 1 name has disappeared because it's now being obscured by the contents of this. So to continue with my analogy of the pages, what I've done there is I've taken the back page of my 4 pages, moved it up 1 page, and inserted it. So if you consider that with an analogy, what you'll find is obviously I wouldn't be able to see the back page because there would be a page now on top of that, which is a full white page. So what I'm going to do now is I can turn off this layer visibility, which will obviously give my checkerboard effect, and we'll reveal the layer 1 as well. So again, I can move this up again, turn on my layer visibility, and now layer 2 is obscured because it's on top of that. And if I move it up one last time, again, notice a little line, let go. Now all 3 are obscured because the solid white box is above all 3. And if I just move it out the road, you can see all 3 are still there. Okay, so I'm just going to go a little bit more complex. I'm just going to drop that down to the bottom. I'll bring it right up there. Oops, sorry, it usually snaps too. And I'm just going to show you that a little bit more. So you can see all 3 layers. So that's layer 3, layer 2, and layer 1 are all on different layers. Now I'm just going to move them a little bit closer to one another. Okay, so you can clearly see that the red layer, which is layer 3, is on top. And as you can see here, it is also on top here. And similarly, if I take layer 1 and move it down, it's the red layer is on top of the green layer, and it's also on top of the blue layer, which is layer 2. So there's layer 2. As you can see, it's above the green, but below the red. And there's layer 3, which is on top of my layer stack, and it's also, as you can see, on top of those images. Okay, I appreciate this is a lot to take in if you're not used to using this technology. If you're failing to understand it, please watch this tutorial again and practice these techniques step by step until you get your heads around it. Okay, so I can obviously then change the layer stacking order. So I've moved this layer 2 to the top, and as you can see, it's now on top of all the other layers. Now if I feel a wee bit sorry for layer 1, maybe think it should be top of the layers, and just drag it on top, and now all of a sudden the green layer has appeared on top. The beauty of this here is it allows you to perform a form of editing of your images, which is known as non-destructive editing. If you use layers, then it'll give you the flexibility to review your work and make your changes, whereas destructive editing will, as the name would indicate, destroy your images. And if you're not careful in your saving methodology, you can permanently damage your images. So anyway, hopefully you've gathered this here, this nature of the layers and the stacking. But I'm just going to move on to adjustment layers. So what we have here is this image of Katy Perry, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate one of these chickens. So maybe go with this one here. Okay, maybe I've decided in this image, hey Annie Leibovitz, there's just not enough chickens in this. Okay, so I'm going to have this wee chicken here back here. Okay, so again we've got our image open as our layer, which is our background layer. Now this will automatically, most of your images that you'll encounter that you're using Photoshop will be under a .jpeg file, but whenever you're saving in Photoshop, whenever you create a new layer, now I'm just going to duplicate the layer. This can be completed in 2 different ways. You can either take this and drag it onto a new layers icon, and that duplicates your layer, or you can press Command J or Control J depending on what platform you're on, and that will duplicate your layers. The reason why you duplicate your layers is because if I just hit my hotkeys for saving, what it'll do is it'll automatically save it as a Photoshop file rather than a JPEG. As you can see, there's a file type which is a .jpeg, and it automatically wants to save it off as a PSD or a Photoshop document because it detects the layers in here. So you always, if you're doing any work in Photoshop, always work with your layers on. Very first thing you should do is always duplicate your layer. First thing is it'll automatically default as a different file type whenever you're saving it. So it saves you accidentally overwriting your other image. So very easily done. So I'm just going to cancel that. I'm not going to save that. But whenever you're doing this yourself, please do. Okay, so what I have done here is I have 2 copies of this image. I have one here, and if I move this to the side, you can see now in the background there's another image remaining. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use what's known as a layer mask. Now layer masks are a little bit complicated. They're an extremely useful tool, but essentially the way they work to summarize it most easily would be they're like a stencil. So where you have white, it's showing you the whole change. Because if I turn off this layer visibility, the change was I duplicated this layer. So all of this layer has been shown. So as I say, that's just like a stencil. That is just it's showing all of the change. So it's just a frame. Okay, so just like a stencil, what I need to do is cut holes in my stencil to allow this to be to show only this chicken, which is what I want to add. Okay, so there's two ways I can do this here. I can use an additive process or a reductive process where I either add to the image or subtract from it. So what I want to do is I want to move these chickens. So what I think it'll do is I make the stencil totally solid, so none of the change goes through. And sorry, let me just invert that again. So the chicken's there. I'm just going to leave my cursor there. I'm going to invert it. And okay, so my ball not down there. And then I go to my brush. So I've made it black. So if I want to paint on a black, I have to paint with a white tool. So make sure white is your foreground color, and then we just paint in, and there's my chicken returning. Okay, now what you might want to do in Photoshop is you might want to use your eraser tool or something like that to remove the background. But if you do that, then as I say, that'll be a destructive editing, which will be less flexible. So we have this chicken here, okay, and what we'll do is, as you can see here, we've got the stencil with a little white change, which is what you're allowing to be changed or showing. So I'm just going to press X to flip my foreground and background colors, and then I'm just going to do this very roughly because I don't want to take this too long over this tutorial. Okay, and we've got to cut a wee bit of that chicken's comb away. And obviously I want to keep the shadow, but I can obviously add the shadow artificially later on. So I'm just going to do this very quickly so you get the idea of doing this. Okay, so there very quickly is our chicken. I'm going to return the image back, make the layer visibility or the layer visible again, and now I can move this chicken around to some other part of the yard. I maybe press Control T. Maybe reduce the chicken down a wee bit in size, and let's see. Well, we'll maybe put this chicken just behind Kitty here, like this here. Okay, we'll maybe make the chicken a wee bit smaller, just so it looks a wee bit different to the chicken we had before. So I'm just going to put this chicken a wee bit behind Katy Perry, so that I don't need to bring in the image. And what I'll do is I'll take in my and what we'll do is just get this so the chicken's kind of hidden in behind Katy Perry's dress there, like so. Okay, so that's a very quick whistle stop tour around the layers options in Photoshop. You can see hopefully you can see the value of your layers and your value of your adjustment layers. This would be, just to finally summarize why you'd use adjustment layers. As I said, it's for like blending images, or if you have a photograph of two people and one's blinking one image and the other one's got a funny expression in the other one, then you can use this here to change the expressions very easily and non-destructively, as I'd mentioned before. Okay, there will be further tutorials in this piece of software. A very powerful, useful piece of software. Highly recommend that you practice this here to increase your skills, and I'll catch you back here next time. Thanks for watching.